Egunon guztioi eta izan zaitezte beste behin ongi etorri Azkuna Zentroaren izenean. Hementxe gara Gutun Zuria Bilboko letren nazioarteko jaialdi berezi honetan eta are bereziagoa azken eguna izateagatik. Bienvenidos, bienvenidas al Festival Gutun Zuria, una vez más, Festival Internacional de las Letras de Bilbao. Zaren zareak harrapatuko gaitu gaur eta galdera asko dauzkagu gogoan. Zareak ezagutzen gaitu eta guk ezagutzen aldugu bera. Zarea demokratikoa da, hain demokratikoa, bai. Cada vez es más importante la información generada por los propios ciudadanos, ¿no? Todos nosotros, al fin y al cabo, y su distribución global por Internet. Hay algunos que hablan, hay quienes hablan ya de este fenómeno como el quinto poder que vigila a periodistas, grandes medios, empresas, políticos, instituciones y que genera criterio social. Pero en realidad somos todos vigilados. Marta Peirano nos habla precisamente de la vigilancia a la que estamos expuestos y, sobre todo, por la misma red. Evocando a Orwell, Marta Peirano dice así en su charla TED: ¿por qué me vigilan si no soy nadie? Hemos llenado las redes sociales, los foros, chats y listas de correo o los weblogs que tanto han impactado en la comunicación social. Cada uno de nosotros, nosotras, es la red de la red. Somos parte de ella, pero esa es la pregunta. ¿De qué manera? Marta Peirano sabe de vigilancia, infraestructuras, soberanía tecnológica, propaganda computacional y cambio climático. Su último libro es El enemigo, conoce el sistema y hoy lo comparte con todos nosotros en Gutun Zuria. Le acompañará Iván de la Nuez. Y quiero recordar las palabras de Hans Kuhn. Así decía: no todo lo técnicamente posible es humanamente correcto y éticamente responsable. Gozatu, Marta Peirano zuekin, txaloak.
Buenas tardes. Bueno, estoy aquí en nombre del equipo asesor del festival para acompañar a mi admirada.
I'm here on behalf of the curating team of the festival with my friend Marta Peirano. And yesterday we were mentioning Lenin's body, that wanted to be preserved for eternity. So I am like the invisible man that will sort of provoke her so she can share her knowledge and her career with us. Yesterday we were talking about the double body of the king, and obviously I'm not her double body, but it is a great pleasure for me to be here on behalf of Fernando Pérez, Raquel Esparza, Alasne, Beñat, Iñaki, the curating team for the festival.
Siempre he admirado mucho en Marta.
I always admire that what she does has a real impact on the world. Non-fiction, often in Spain, has been oriented towards local, personal subject matters, which are okay. I think it is okay. And then there was a large amount of non-fiction book that act as the translation or the dubbing of other trends that we see somewhere else in the world, but do not really contribute much. They say not much to us, only update some issues that we know in our day-to-day life. But this is not the case with Marta. She's a journalist, she's an activist, she's a writer, writes essays. She's been organizing important projects to have an impact on the society, and she's done this at a very high level. So together with Snowden, when she talks, or she's at the same level as Assange or Snowden, she's somebody that really has to be treated as one of the top gurus in her field. Since we're talking about here, about the here that we are living right now at 1 in the afternoon in Bilbao, given these conditions, these circumstances, when I began writing essays, I would be asked whether the falling of the Berlin Wall would have had an impact in our society. And I wrote because it had a big impact in my life, and I always wanted to read or do these, but not in a mainstream way. So the idea I had is that the wall was, crumbling down, both sides, and that there was a new way to see the world. So when the Communist Party fell down to give, so the PC for Communist Party led way to the PC as personal computer, then we moved from the handmade manual work from workers, then it moved to blue collars, and that was the rise of Microsoft and others. So there was a change in how things were being produced, and we did need the falling of the socialist states, totalitarian states, for it to happen. This had a double meaning, and you've been a front runner using Berlin as kind of a platform to launch projects. So it is true to say that we were being surveyed and watched and censored by the communist state, but also would protect them. And that many people were sort of shelterless. So I'd like to ask you, Marta, do you think what is happening right now is not a change in how we produce, but in the place of production? So suddenly we face this situation where our homes turn our workplaces, which are also places of exploitation and self-exploitation. So since we're talking about here, you wrote a book titled The Enemy Knows the System. I think your presence is a privilege, so you can really share with us your knowledge on this field, and whether you've thought about what I am saying now, and also whether algorithms and this media now have sort of got through our houses. Well, thank you very much, Ivan, for this very kind introduction. Thank you to all of you for attending. Yes, I have thought about that. I've considered that. There is this invasion, not so much of new technologies in our homes, because they were already there, but of these new dynamics, basically of working, living, relating, doing everything in the same space. And I'm not talking only about the home, but about the computer itself. So it's 8. So luckily I am done. Now I'm going to watch a film in the same computer where I am also sending, or from which I am sending my last email. And I think this pandemic and lockdowns, they made easier this intrusion of these dynamics in some spaces that they would not get into previously. 2 clear examples: health. Certainly our health data that were previously protected because they make us very vulnerable. They speak about us and might have an impact in our future life, and they were overprotected. Years ago, I said there are many laws that protect our health data. There are 57 laws in Europe and in Spain that to protect our health data. Should you have any handicap or a degenerative disease, or if you've suffered from depression, all that information is very much protected. But suddenly, this pandemic makes possible to make part of our lives some models or some systems that lead into an interaction with the social insurance or the government that makes it for our data to go through, well, the computer servers that belong to certain companies that then talk to governments. And we've seen that the health departments of Google and other companies now, they have grown enormously, because now it's something that was unthinkable in the past. Now it's something normal, that is to sort of give to these large corporations data that make us really vulnerable. And then something else is also the arrival of these 2 schools. Google Schools is the solutions chosen by public schools to keep on teaching, but for school to teach through Google Schools, they require the parents' consent, because you do not have the authorizations to watch children or a child unless the father or the mother grants that consent. So parents might know Google or Apple, that is another choice, Apple, to teach, but they've got to choose to give away those data indefinitely of these minors, their children, to this company running these servers, or not to have their children doing e-schooling. And this is a crime in Spain. I think you are, as a parent, forced to make your children attend the school up until the age of 11. So now we are sort of delegating our responsibilities in the hands of some infrastructures that are now critical. So people attend the school, e-schooling, in spite of the fact that they cannot attend the real school. So maybe we're delegating and leaving our data in the hands of these corporations. And these corporations, they have been growing enormously. Some experts in economy at Washington Post mentioned that it is a paradox because everything is crumbling down because the service industry has gone bankrupt. Many companies had to close, but the economy is not doing so bad because there was a small number of large companies that have grown so much, and we're talking about the main digital platforms that have found a way to use all these infrastructures for everything we have to do for a whole year. They've grown so much that it is counterbalancing. So many middle-sized fishes and small fishes died, but whales, they've grown really big. Now they're really fat, and the volume of water is the same, and the global amount of fishes is the same. So this is a situation in which it is very difficult to set a fire alarm in your case when there's already a fire. Then you have to think ahead. And I think that we are very lucky to have this pandemic because taking into account all the provisions of forecast by epidemiologists, this pandemic could have been much worse, might have killed many more people, not only 1.2% of the population, maybe concerned children, as it was with polio at the time. So there were many possibilities of these to have been even worse. And even if this has been terrible, this allows us somehow to understand the circumstances of a pandemic and to build enough infrastructures not to delegate on data mining companies that then run and use our vulnerabilities. I've told you recently that I see you as the writer of a thriller. I am really scared about the data you give us. You talk about this lack of possibility to concentrate. I think now we can only concentrate for a span of 9 minutes. Yes, I think the concentration span has decreased. And also, even though I learned this from my hero, Paula Farber, that we should know about the impact of all this because of the overproduction of messages and also because of the addiction we have to them. Always they know what you want and they give you something else. Yes, Marta says that the fact that the day after of the declaration of a pandemic and the locking down of population, the situation of a home lockdown, these infrastructures that were not there 20 years ago, that have made it possible for us to keep on relating to each other, working, and even relating with our elderly that we didn't want to infect and eventually kill, but they could not be left alone in this very terrifying pandemic if you are over 70. So there are thousands of good things we could say about this infrastructure, but it's not necessary to exchange or to give them our future in exchange of, for this sort of capacity to relate to each other. So we have Chinese social system that is like the expression of this data capitalism, but it is an open one. So all Chinese citizens are under surveillance. So whenever they do or not do things, that they get more or less credits. So you get more credits when you do things that turn you into a good citizen, like working more hours, like behave yourself, like take care of the elderly, to attend the government demonstrations, say good things about the government on the media, and that gives you more and more, well, brownie points or credits, and you might get a better place in a better neighborhood. Your children will attend a better school, you will gain access to a better health system, and if you lose some credits because you said something against the minister, because you attended a rally or a demonstration, but then because you said that Hong Kong, what's going on in Hong Kong is not very nice, because maybe you bought more alcohol than you should. I think an example, one of the criteria was, are you buying more napkins or alcohol? So the thing is, they remove your bonus, your points, and then they remove your margin of maneuver. They fire you from your job, they remove you from your neighborhoods, you can no longer rent houses in some neighborhoods. And then since you pay everything with your mobile telephone, this is related to the digitization of money, you have the same amount of money, but you're not able to use it for what you want to. So you end up by getting your capacity to buy train, plane, or underground tickets. So they lock you down in your place little by little. So I think the good citizens will be able to walk under the sun, and the good citizens, the bad citizens will be able to go nowhere, and good citizens will be able to walk under the sun freely. So we have this, but in a not very clear way, because you lose a bonus points because maybe you have been taking many drugs for this or that, or maybe you requested a DNA test because everybody wants to have ancestors that are Cherokee, and here we want to have Viking ancestors. So you want to 23andMe or MyHeritage. You go to all these companies to see your family tree, and then in exchange, people keep your data, and then these are bought by human resources companies, and with algorithms, they will know whether you are more inclined to have a cancer or to have a depression, and they would like or not to hire you. And this has many consequences which are not clear to us, but for Chinese citizens at least, they have an application, an app that will let them know you are getting more credit or less credit according to what you do and how you behave. So having said this, we are living in a moment where we have very asymmetrical access to this information. That is to say, you know what you do, but you do not know how those data are registered or interpreted or expressed in your work life. If you combine this with facial recognition systems, which were going to be banned in Europe till we were studying their impact, but now they are on the contrary multiplying and being reinforced with public money. So these are facial recognition systems that you cannot really resist because you do not even know they're running. We might be surrounded to cameras that are linked to face recognition systems, and we would not even know about it. But you cannot either refuse them because, I mean, if you ask me to identify myself, I might say, well, yes or not. But if you identify me with a face recognition system, I am identified immediately, and also all the information about me gets activated, and also some criteria to discriminate this or that. And that means I am no longer free citizens around the world. I think I shifted away from your question. No, everything you say is very interesting, says Ivan, and terrifying, as I said. There is an anecdote that I would like to use to introduce a third concern. Years ago, an orchestra conductor, Laurent Ban, died. He was very popular in Cuba. So I thought that I would listen to him when I was a child, and then I started listening for his music. And I was a teenager at the time when I would listen to his music. So in my 8th attempt of research, suddenly they start proposing me anti-curl lotions. So if I liked Lampvan, I was supposed to be black. So this is why I get all these proposals on products to remove my curls, for example, from my hair. They were supposing I was black. And I wrote to them saying, well, you're wrong, I am not black. So maybe we can use this system also to cheat on them. So some recent dissidents from internet that now there was this documentary of all these people that were repenting from participating on internet, and I didn't like at all. So we have these activists on internet and people that know the system. Has your gaze towards the network changed? Did you think it was a field of freedom in the beginning and then a source of repression rather? Have you evolved also from this point of view, or from the very beginning you suspected that this will get us where we are now? And what do you think about all these people that say they repent? Well, I will start by these people. You're talking about, when you talk about these people that are the repentant, and it is called the social dilemma, but this is in a very clear and unpartisan way copying the documentary that was called the Facebook dilemma, and it is so much a copy of it that they sort of still have the interviewees. The Facebook dilemma would say how Facebook, that is a company that was set by 3 boys, basically to get to know more girls at university, then turns into this phenomenon. And they grow without really understanding the scope or the reach of what they're doing. In India, many people are using it to communicate among themselves, and they do not even have anybody talking any of the local dialect, so they were not showing any interest in relation to local laws, and things happened like the genocide that was happening in Myanmar. Now there is a coup d'etat, but before the coup d'etat, the Buddhist monks and armed forces, they got together to put an end to a very specific minority in a very bloody way, starting by very negative campaign on Facebook. But Facebook did not know about it because they had nobody talking the language of Myanmar. So where do you have previously seen this if you have a company operating in a company without knowing local laws and rules and procedures or even the language? So some anecdotes like this happen. So some of these are related to human rights or civil rights, and Facebook is totally ignorant and they do it on purpose, and they ignore all this. So that first documentary was dwelling on that. And from that document, the next fleet, that is a digital platform that is very similar to Facebook, but really they're not only selling series to you, they are watching your habits and seeing how much you resist when they tell you things like, if you like this series, maybe you would like this other. So this kind of documentary turns an issue that is really a philosophical issue about what responsibility do this company hold when they provide a tool that will change the world, but only is doing that to spy on their users and make money. So what are their liabilities and responsibility? This is a company, a private company making lots of money. So this turns, as I was saying, into an issue that these were only boys, that didn't know what they were doing, and there are ways to correct this. And then all the main characters in this documentary are still people making lots of money with Facebook and, well, working on that industry and becoming very popular and doing what we call here trying to be on both sides. They want to have the pie and eat it. They want to be in there and out there, out of it, into it and out of there. No, if you are part of it, then you are liable and you have responsibilities. And then they say, no, but we're part of this, but we're not responsible. So, of course, oh my God. How about your second question? Yeah, your evolution. Well, the evolution, because these two books are very different. I lived for many years in Berlin, and I organized an event called a crypto party. Now it's grown big, and it happens in many countries. I was living in a Turkish neighborhood, and I had a studio flat there, so people could attend my studio to ask about cryptography. Because this was before the Snowden age, we were beginning to see that Facebook and Google were becoming very popular, but nobody really knew the consequences of to their privacy. And then we started this studio, and I realized soon, I am a journalist, that people did not know about this field because it was dangerous to have a sensitive soul, like a Syrian dissident or a Cuban dissident or a Chinese dissident. And then you would upload to Google blogs that interview, or you would like to interview them through Skype. At the time, journalists, they love to talk that they would like to defend their sources, even go to prison, not to say who they are. But then they would be using these tools that would really reveal all these, reveal their sources, because they didn't understand them, what they were doing. So this is why I decided to write a manual for journalists to organize crypto parties. Because many people were asking us, okay, so who should we invite? Who should attend? So I got together with my friend to write this handbook for crypto parties. This is quite a good handbook, by the way, but I wanted it to be specific for activists or for journalists, that is for my people. And well, at the time I was coming back to Madrid to work in diario.es. And then I released that book, and at the time, Snowden had already shared thousands of documents about this big NSA spy network, and about all these Five Eyes network with Australia, England, New Zealand, and Canada. And well, I thought that story was really good. I don't know if you're aware that Snowden, after many years, while fighting against himself, deciding whether he had to reveal of this. But after all this, he decides to choose a particular journalist that he thinks he's very honest and decent. They defend the same values. He works for The Guardian at the time, and then he chooses that man. And he tries to give him all this information, but he wanted to do it in a safe way without betraying the place where they are, their identity or anything, because they are talking about the NSA, that is one of the most important intelligence companies in the world. So then there is this journalist that comes and he talked to Snowden and said, you can only get information if you install this cryptographic clue. And then Snowden gets so nervous that he produces a video that is like a tutorial for him to get the cryptographic clue. And this journalist, he thinks like he is mad. So then there is a small community that grows with this director of a cinema, and I forgot the name because I had COVID some months ago and my brain is not working properly. I lost part of my memory. But well, there was this community that was created that was very useful to get to know why journalists need to know how to handle cryptography to be able to these kind of sources, because I mean, he had a scoop, one of the most important scoops of his life. In fact, after that, he organized even a whole new journal, and he was about to miss it because he didn't know how to install that cryptography clue. But I always wanted to write the book that I wrote afterwards. I was lucky enough to write about technology in the El Mundo, a newspaper, in 1997 when internet was getting to Spain. And at the time, I had a boyfriend at the time that had internet at home, because then I had it only much later at home. So I met also a group of hackers that were operating in Madrid. They will get together to exchange codes. And they were very much into cryptography, and they could unveil conversations. They knew how to get into the right IRC channels. So from them on, my vision of the communications on the internet were always defined by who is providing you this communication, what are they getting out of it, and how safe do you feel having this communication with somebody? I never abandoned that vision, and as social media got here, I also started a blog in the year 2002 that I've run for 10 years, and I was talking about my things, about technology, and I learned how to do pages on websites on HTML. I also learned some programming, because I thought it was very silly to write about these things without really deeply knowing the main elements about how all this was built and managed. And then social media got here, and everybody said that everything that was going on the Arab Spring was thanks to Facebook, and I got really crossed, because Western media, what happened at the time is that they could follow some of the events through Facebook, because it was their own tool, and Western media, they knew how to handle this, but they could not otherwise know what was going on in Tunisia or El Cairo, because they do not speak the language, they are not within the circles of influence in those countries. So suddenly, it seems that Facebook suddenly came to the Arab world and walk this spirit of emancipation of the rebels, young rebels in the area. And I got really crossed at this because I think people were really blind to think that the only little thing we understand is what will explain it all. And this tool that explains everything is a tool that we do not know at all, anything at all, because it is absolutely unclear. And then Snowden, years later, he said that this was the tool used by the government to spy on the whole world. So I had this in my mind for years, and then I sat down and wrote this book. Ivan says that sometimes this is very interesting because here a business turns into a right. It is not a right to drive a car, but getting into internet, access to internet is like a right now. So there is a relationship in between the need to have this to be somebody. If we publish books, we've been publishing books during the pandemic. And even if you didn't want to have to be on the social media, you had to. Otherwise, you could not really, if you were publishing a book, talk about your book. So let's look back to 2019. The world in the world, there are many demonstrations. People are protesting. There's the neoliberalism in South America. We're questioning the revolution in Nicaragua. So there's this wave of demonstrations all over, and even in the Cuban socialist regime, artists, activists. And in Hong Kong, there is a wave of demonstrations and protests. So many things are being questioned. Also, the gay movement are questioning Putin. So there are many social protests all over. So all political regimes were really with their back against the wall. I mean, the elites no longer had the occasion to give an answer to all this questioning. And then we get the pandemic. And we have this idea to go back to a new normality. What do you think? This moving back to a new normality will sort of make us forget about everything that was happening at the time or not? Many of the things that were on the front pages at the time were all these protests in Hong Kong, Santiago de Chile. And now we see that Hong Kong is no longer the same independent country that used to be because for the sake of the pandemic, they've set a new civil security law that turns every Hong Kong citizen into subjects of China. And this has happened under the premise that in order to control the pandemic, we need these extraordinary measures that we all take on board. That in some places where this kind of protests were not happening, we now admit the use of apps like the COVID radar, like this passport for vaccines that are executed through your mobile telephone if you want to do something in relation to COVID, and now this is becoming something like natural. These are not even tools that a large company in the States is using to make money. This is your government installing an app in your telephone, in your cell, under the excuse that this is in order to control a pandemic where only 1.2% of the population will die. So this is an exceptional event that requires exceptional measures. So we've got to see how many of these exceptional measures go beyond or survive the pandemic, go beyond this crisis. And we'll see when we are all vaccinated and in hospital they will be able to treat people with infections. We'll see at that time if we keep it forever, because it is very convenient for the government to watch on us. It is easier to survey and govern than to govern, to rule. So the world is never normal. When we say normality, what normality? But these kind of popular expressions are easier to control when you have this kind of control elements in their pockets, because it's easier to control people with the stories than with guns. So once you get into their pockets and you have this device, that is not like the radio or the TV where there is a message we all hear and then we might agree or not. No, this is talking to each of us independently, and nobody else knows what they're telling me. You know, you might go to a square and agree or disagree, but this radio in our pockets is telling us different things to each and every one of us. So this is interesting because they are telling us what they know we need to hear, because within this asymmetrical war, when you want to protect your security and your future, you know nothing about those listening to you, and they know everything about you, what you fear, where you go, what secrets you hold, and it makes you very vulnerable. Okay, so now I think, says Ivan, we should give the floor to the audience. Thank you very much, Marta, for attending, for sharing your ideas. It's been great to listen to you. And I think the audience will make very intelligent questions. And we'll give them the floor. And the book is excellent. This book of essays that replaced last year's festival is really excellent. You should read it. The book replacing the festival, the last year's edition of the festival. It is really good. What do you think about the new things in the field of new technologies? That is the NFT technology, non-fungible tokens. Maybe you can explain it better than me. This is the trick, because this is like asking me, I want to ask you about God, but you explain who God is. There is a New York journalist that sold his column for some $1,000. What do you think is going to be the professed use of this technology? So the real question is that this is a way to buy and sell money. It's a mechanism to buy and sell money. It's a scam. So this is a money laundering system. It's a multi-currency system for exchange without paying any commissions, without having to declare it. Because let's explain what a non-fungible token is. A non-fungible token is a digital object that is an object like a column in the New York Times or Bansky digitalized work. So an ensemble of O's and ones with a certain shape that we call a painting, song, or column, and that has been transformed into a code. And this is non-fungible because it does not deteriorate with use. You do not wear it out when you, as it happens with, for example, a dish of macaroni, you're eating it, you wear it out. It gets wasted when you eat it. But these things do not get wasted and they do not erode. So, because they're not fungible and they're like infinite. This is not like a currency that is related to gold in a national bank. So they have an infinite potential value. So within this fiber of cryptocurrencies, where many investment funds and many people like Elon Musk and so on, well-known people in the world of digital finance, they found this way where if you mark as an NFT anything like a column at the New York Times, then it turns into a piece of art. And then in financial investment, this is treated in a certain way. That means you do not pay as many taxes as if you're buying an island or a house. So the specific use with good or bad will of this is to not pay taxes, not to pay taxes. So Ivan was talking to this very interesting researcher, Dursek, and they were talking about the theory of the two bodies of the king. And I thought this is a non-fungible token, because the theory is how can you make the king, when he dies, his body to turn into something that is not an iconic relic, but it still is something valuable. So the theory is that the king has two bodies, the body that turns into a corpse when he dies, that is the material body, and then something is classified like the body of Lenin that has a different value. And that is more or less sacred and unique, like an NFT. And it will be the case with Lenin's body. So interesting uses for this. In a world where musicians are desperate because the only way for them to make money was to play gigs, it's no longer so, because we're in the pandemic. But the other way to make money was to sell songs on Spotify. Then they get so little money out of it, just 0.0000 cents whenever people play their songs. So another way to do this is by turning your disc into an NFT, and somebody buys it. So when you buy it, the advantage is you can say this is yours, but you have the cryptographic code that says it is yours, that record. That is the only advantage. So I think in this setting of a pandemic, where musicians or people that produce things that we would pay for previously, now they can only sell them as non-fungible tokens. That is your way to make donations to an artist during these low times. Is this the right answer to your question? Good. Have a precise question. Have you considered doing fiction? Because it is really scary what you talk about. We're very vulnerable. That is very clear. Societies are very vulnerable, and people are vulnerable. So this system that is our enemy is also vulnerable. Is somebody looking for its cracks? There are many women extraordinary women, and I am thinking of many of them, that are researching into this field of surveillance and monitoring. I didn't suffer from COVID, but I think there is Francesca Bria from the Barcelona City Hall. She's now going to have a job at the EU, I think. Do you know what she is going to do? You've been talking about all the horrors of this system, but do you think the system itself is vulnerable? I know there are really good people working in order to find the cracks of these systems. I always try to make a difference in between internet and social network or media. And it is difficult now to do so because most of the traffic on internet happens on the servers of social media. And this is related to the fact that we pay for data to gain access to internet, but really we get into internet through WhatsApp, Twitter, or any other social media. This is not internet. Internet is a network of under-earth cables and wires and protocols. But when you are on the social media, they have their own protocols. They work in a different way. And it is very difficult to map it because it's really obscure. So you have the undersea wires. In fact, there is teleography that is mapping every year the maps that run under the oceans. But those wires was a network made by public operators with public money in the 90s. Well, all that network now has been bought and sold, so now it's in other hands, and the new cables and wires that make us able to have a larger width band and so on. Now, for example, I think in Malaga, we have a new wire that belongs to Google. So internet is not the social media, it's like an opportunistic mushroom that is taking the best or using the best of internet, but it is now turning into internet because they are beginning to replace internet with their own wires, their own antenna, and what is especially important to me, with their own satellites, because these projects of satellites run by Elon Musk, like Starlink or the Google project, or the project of having a little network of small satellites around the planet. This is related to the logic, intuition or forecast that the environmental disaster will have an impact on antenna and undersea cables. So we think that in a short term we might find in a situation where most of our infrastructure in terms of wires and so will be depending on the natural disasters. That is a high risk that we have, and this is why now they're running all the satellites. So the social media, they are turning into the new source of telecommunications for countries where they do not even know what the law is about because they do not even care about it. I think this is to no longer delegate those infrastructures and to start investing money. It is very easy for governments. Why are we adding infrastructures if Google is already doing that and they've got lots of money and then we get it for free from them? Well, for governments that do not last for a long time and they only think in the short term, so it is very difficult for them to consider that in 10 years' time this is going to be very expensive. Yeah, but it was not me ruling, so it will not be me ruling there at the time, so it will be okay. So it is important, I think, to consider what are the plans for these type of things. Google Schools, for example, when the pandemic is over, now we've discovered that many children live in faraway, distant regions or places, and for them it's very difficult to attend school, so we could do e-schooling thanks to technology. But are we going to keep on doing the e-school because the Google people are so nice, they let us have it for free? Are we going to invest on the money to create a network that will be meaningful for us? Because Google Schools is the same in Sao Paulo or in Madrid. And maybe eventually our needs and our culture is really much different. Maybe it's not our children that have to adapt to the overall rules of Google Schools, but rather we should have a software adapting to the specificities of the education in Spain. So I think we've got to answer our politicians, what are you planning to do about this? So that this new technologization of health does not go through Microsoft. So how can you make remote schooling without having to give away your data? Who's going to invest on this? What type of software are we going to use? What kind of license are we going to use? Can we modify it in the schools? Should we be able to pay, or should we have to pay for it or not? What is that you're planning to do about it? You might refuse to use WhatsApp, but if your children attend the school and then there is a group of parents and they use a WhatsApp chat, then you cannot give up on that. If you work in an office and they use Telegram to share the work, then you need it. The people say we are silly now because we give away our data. No, but it is because they have turned into our daily living tools. And if we were to get away from them, we will lose a lot, but not save the world, even though we would do that. I always compare this with the climate change issue. You can do everything at home. You might recycle, not eat meat, not have children, not use plastic, not drive a car, not to fly. You might do many things, but they will not save you from climate change. You need a collective action. You need decisions to be made at a different level. So the first way to ask for this is to attend your school and say, I disagree. I don't want my child to choose in between getting an education and being watched. So you might go to your office and tell them, I disagree. All our interaction should not go through Amazon services or Google Docs, because I feel this is pushing us to work in a certain way that is not what we need. And all these companies have been fined for being a monopoly, but still they keep on running their businesses. So this is how you do it. It's not enough for you to do it. It's not enough to throw your cell phone into the dustbin because you've got satellites that have know your face because you've been showing it on social media for years. So I think we should invest on infrastructure that do not depend on companies that we do know already. They are toxic companies.
Sí,
Estamos en el límite del tiempo, pero bueno.
O sea, yo soy una escritora de terror, pero ahí pone 5 minutos para el fin.
I am a terror writer, but there I am seeing 5 minutes to the end. So somebody on the streaming wants to ask the following about this social Chinese credit. It was a chapter in a science fiction series. It is curious how this became a reality so fast. Do you think bitcoins or other cryptocurrencies will turn into the universal currency? Do you think it contributes to something new in relation to euros or dollars? Yes, she says. The social credit system has been there and growing for years before Black Mirror. But everything has sort of now become more clear thanks to the digitization of the currency. Now you find people that are asking for money in China with a QR code in a piece of cardboard, because now they can only get money through that way. There is no physical money now. You can spend your money wherever you want to because nobody will know what you use your money, how you use your money. You might pay with physical money and nobody knows you've been paying there. Or you go to a shop and you buy something, nobody knows you've been there or you bought that. The digitization of money is fundamental to this new system of hyper vigilance or surveillance. And the Chinese social credit system only allows you to go where they think you should go, and you might not even be able to buy a plane ticket to run away from that place where you are under control. And about Bitcoin, well, this is about financial speculation, and they involve banks. Banks are really investing in these currencies. So once banks decide to get into the cryptos, well, if they think this is the right way to speculate and everybody else would be able to do it, there is a difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum and all the others. Some have been validated by the banks and the others have not. Many goodwill people are going to lose lots of money investing on cryptocurrencies, and also I think they have very good uses that we're not talking about yet because they are complex and experimental. They are not an expert on cryptocurrencies. I think they've got many possibilities, but also that these possibilities now are being sort of buried under speculation.
Una más, porque nos queda menos de un minuto. No sé si alguien...
Para el fin, nos quedan 55.
1 minute to go. Whenever we talk about this, we say that companies sell our data and we get ads in exchange. So when you get into social media, the volume of propaganda or ads is quite small. So my doubt is who is buying that apart from government? So all that data trafficking, is it justified by who? Who's paying that? There is like this abstract company buying your data, but nobody says who is buying your data. That is a very good question. When we think about ads, we think about banners. Banners on the streets, we think of rectangles where a product or a candidate is being sold, and they are very clearly mentioned as an ad. That is not the kind of advertisement these digital platforms do. No, they observe users, they observe their way they behave, and they analyze that information in order to share them with marketing intelligence. And that means that if you as a user you get into an infinite number of people, profiles, your age, your degrees, people that do the same as you do, people that like this or that, people that might have these diseases, and then the family is genetically predisposed to suffer from that disease as well, and also because this has been happening to people around them. In fact, there was a big scandal some years ago. Who is buying this? Marketing companies, political campaigns, and especially companies that are called data brokers, that are very powerful, that we do not know about. They're called Action, Comstars. They have funny names that do not define what they do, and they buy those data. They buy profiles like Facebook some years ago was selling information about women that had been harassed in their elderly young age. And then they sell it to, for example, health companies or to gun companies. I am thinking about this profile, women that were harassed. So then these companies might develop marketing products or political products that then would be sold directly to these people, would go into their cells or their pockets, or to manipulate their perception of reality. So they do this or that, like buying an alarm for the home, or vote a very authoritarian candidate that says they're going to shoot all harassers. So this is not an open ad, but this is a different vision of the world, like a Spotify. When you do not pay, they drain your brain with terrible ads, so you hate them. This is made because for you
Agradezco de verdad, pero... Y luego...
to hate them, and then they show you the banner, come on, be happy, pay, subscribe. And then you pay your 10 euros a month, and then you are part, according to them, part of the family enjoying this music without any ads. But then you realize that all the list of rap, electronic musics that show everything that is more popular in every genre, then there was always the Greg face, because he was publishing releasing a new record. It's as if he was the only musician in the world. So you don't get it as an open ad. This is like the expression of the common will, like everybody loves this singer, for example. And same goes for the news. With the vision of the planet, depending on who you are, you might do a search in Google, like immigration. And then the reality that appears in Google Answers and what they show to you is sponsored. And you think that Google is like the oracle of the truth. And whenever you want to know who is saying something that is right, who was the actor in this film, and when this or that happened, then you get into Google as if Google had one only answer. But usually when you don't look for a precise thing, like who was the main character or when that battle happened, well, all those answers are sponsored, and they give you a vision of the world that has been defined for you by an algorithm. That is the kind of ads you get. People sometimes say Amazon, they're not very good at an ad because they are showing to me a car that I already bought. No, it's because behind that there is something else. This is so silly that you then trust them and you say, no, they're not advertising anything to me. So this was the end. So once again, thank you very much.
Eskerrik asko, espero dugu saioa zen gustuko izatea. Saio honen ondoren, egileak liburuak sinatzen arituko dira liburu dendazen, Azkuna zentroko liburu dendan. Irteera modu seguru eta ordenatuan egiteko, egon zeuen eserlekuetan, eta bete itzazue aretoko langileen jarraibideak, amaierako lerroetatik hasi eta segurtasun distantzia utziz. Eskerrik asko. Muchas gracias. Esperamos que hayan disfrutado del encuentro. A continuación, los y las autoras estarán firmando libros en la zona de Liburu Dendaz, la librería de Azkuna Zentroko.